Hey everyone, Tim here. I am back home in Australia, where we got here yesterday, and I've got a whole 10 days at home. But the first thing I'm doing is answering your questions for this month's Patreon feature interview. So the first question I have is from Silver Kiri. Will we ever get sheet music on your violin parts in Neo? Many of us violinists, I especially, are desperate. Also, any tips for clean vocals, etc. So I'll answer the first bit first. Yes, possibly, but not right now. I used to think that there wasn't enough demand, but I do get asked more and more, so it's definitely something I'm looking at. But I never really write things out at the time when I first compose, so then basically the only reason to write them out would be so violinists like yourself can learn them. And it just hasn't ever found itself to get to the top of the to-do list. But it's something I'm hoping to do, I think probably sometime next year is when I maybe might be looking at it. Any tips for clean vocals? Make sure that you get lots of sleep, that you eat healthy, that you drink lots of water, that you don't smoke or drink too much alcohol, all these sort of things while you're trying to perform. Aside from that, practice. Make sure that you take the time to work on your instrument. And I mean, as a singer, it is that important thing where you have to really focus on your whole body in order to make sure that you're doing things the best way possible. But just taking the time to go through some different parts, make sure you're really listening and analyzing what you're doing and taking the time to focus on that. And then have a listen to any bits that aren't working. If your voice is getting tired, try to work out, at which points is that happening. My voice used to get tired because I would push too much in my upper register. So it was like, well, how do I hit that note without pushing? And so then it's about making sure you do a good warm up and things like that. There's lots of little things like that. Maybe I should probably do a vocal tutorial sometime as well. So maybe I can answer more questions with something like that. All right, now Laurie Andrews. I'm very curious about your techniques for composing music within the band, and who does what for coming up with your beautiful songs. Are you classically trained on violin? I was blown away when I heard your beautiful vocals and violin playing, and am in awe of your talents. Thank you very much. I've always loved the violin above all other instruments. Thank you. Thanks for your question, Laurie. So basically, I mean, the way we compose is very varied. So I'll just talk about the way I do things. Quite a lot of stuff is, when we have a section, we have a guitar riff or a piano part or something, which then we are writing over and working structurally. So getting the structure in place first is really important. Whilst that's getting in place, might have some ideas for things that happen over the top, like violin and vocals and heavy vocals and all that sort of stuff. But the most important thing is definitely to make sure that the structure is flowing, which then gives rise to opportunities to create great things happening over the top. When I'm writing my violin or vocal parts, the most common way that I write those parts is by having a demo of what is happening underneath. So it might be the guitar riff, maybe. It might only be the guitar riff. Sometimes it's guitar riff with a demo of the drums, or maybe with bass, but sometimes it's just the guitar riff. And I'll just try things out. So I will improvise different vocal melodies. I'll literally just press play and I'll sing something over the top and see what comes out. Try to be inspired by the chord changes and by the riff and all that sort of stuff. And then I'll see what comes out. Now, when I'm doing that with violin solos, and sometimes with vocal as well, if I'm at home, I will often record that. So when I'm doing a violin solo, I literally might do 10 different takes of a violin solo, just improvising, making shit up, and might do it 10 times in a row. And I might go listen back to find bits that I thought worked really well. And often there's one that you really kind of click and you go, oh yeah, this was, I was feeling the music really well and this was connecting really well. Often, one of those improvisations ends up becoming the basis of what what I'm then doing. Now sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it might be that, and I might just work out an opening line, and that's it. And then I basically will just play that opening line, and then just keep trying to think, okay, what goes next. But a lot of that I do with my instrument, with my voice, actually trying stuff out, or with my violin playing on the instrument, as opposed to doing it all theoretically up there. Whereas the basis of stuff, the chords and stuff like that, is often where you have a bit more vision up here, and might bring that to fruition. Joe Farrell, do you think it's possible that Teemu from Winter Sun is Zen's great-great-great-great-grandson or something? I think he looks the way Zen would look if he weren't a vampire. I'm sure. Joe, by the way, it was good to see you on the recent tour. We saw you in Minneapolis, and I think it was Minneapolis, Calgary. I just remember that you and your brother were at a couple of different shows, 2 or 3. Anyways, yes, we've had this comment a bit about Teemu, and probably that's the honest answer. Cormac Jordan, as a manager, do you think albums are still the way forward? Ola Englund put up a video where he discussed how releasing an album now means it will get a week of heavy publicity and interest, and then is drowned out by new albums the next week, unless you are touring heavily, which local and studio bands can't do. So you'll get more attention if you release singles or EPs in smaller time frames. What are your thoughts or counter arguments on this? It's a very interesting point. So I think that albums are still the way to go, because I think that albums make a bigger splash. And the thing is, for an emerging act, which is most bands, is you want to try and get as many people to pay attention to what you're doing as possible. Now, if you have a new album out, that makes the splash of the album bigger, so it reverberates further throughout the music industry. You're more likely to get coverage from magazines or press and all that sort of stuff. Now, when you have all these magazines and press trying to work out who do we cover, and they can't cover everyone, they have to choose, the reality is that if you're just putting out an EP and they've got 25 bands who release an album that week, they're probably going to deprioritize the EP unless it's for a band that's already quite big. So an EP release, I think, will get less media attention. Now, obviously on social media and all that sort of stuff, it keeps people engaged, which is a real positive. With the ability to, give people something to listen to, keep engaging them with your music, and then not forgetting about you, which is a good thing. And yes, if you put out an album and then you wait, 3 years till the next album comes out and you don't do a lot of touring in between, then yes, there'll be quite a big gap there while people aren't thinking about you. Now, an EP could fill a gap between albums. If you wanted to do, an album every 3 years and you wanted to do an EP somewhere in the middle, that would be good. But if you only do EPs, then yeah, I don't think you're just not going to get that much press coverage, I think. And so that's the challenge, because you do need that to try and uplift your band further. And also for music fans and listeners, I think it is also one of those things where you're going to listen to an album more over and over. It's going to last longer for a listener. So, I mean, for example, like Between the Buried and Me used to release an EP earlier this year. And I listened to it a bunch, but then it felt like it was an EP. It felt like, okay, cool. Like, it's not quite as satisfying as a full album. Like, I liked it, but it wasn't quite as satisfying as a full album. And I'm kind of waiting for part 2, because they kind of split their album into 2 EPs. And then when I get this part 2, then maybe I'll listen to the whole thing through a bit more. Whereas I think that if you give someone a substantial album, then they're going to listen to it more and for longer. So even though maybe the press might only pay attention for a week, that can help get the attention of a lot of fans who then might spend months listening to that album. And then if you follow that up with a tour, then it keeps that interest going further beyond there. But there's definitely not one way to do things in the music industry anymore, and it does, I think, depend on the band and depend where you're at with your career. So there's definitely no only right way like it used to be, maybe. From Smear, hi Tim, you mentioned a proclivity for social justice a few interviews ago, and we met Smear as well in I think it was in Syracuse at that show. So hello to you. Are there any issues or causes you hope to bring awareness to? Alternatively, what interests you the most pertaining to the subject? Yes, okay, so basically my dad was a politician back when I was a little kid, in federal politics here in Australia. And, you know, we grew up in a position where we weren't rich, but we weren't poor. You know, weren't struggling when I was in school or anything like that. And, you know, my family always stressed to me that it was important to make sure that you looked after the people that, you know, couldn't always look after themselves. You know, not everyone is born into a situation that is good, and you can have very, you know, smart people, very clever people who are born into situations that are not of their own making and that are very difficult to get out of. And as a society, that we should make sure that we make an effort to create a society where all people have an opportunity to uplift themselves from whatever situation they are born into. And that shouldn't just be a case of if you're born into a family that has a bit of money or a bit of not that much money, that you're just stuck there forever. Now, of course, there's always isolated examples of people who uplift themselves, and that's great, but it's about the average person being able to do that, because the average person is in a position where often they get stuck in whatever lot in life of what they get born into. So that's just something, I guess that sort of philosophy is something that was kind of drilled into me as a kid, something I'm really passionate about. And so, you know, just things that really are a big deal to me are things like, for example, in Australia, we have these quite insane policies with refugees where if they arrive here on a plane, we let them in, and if they're genuine refugees, they get to stay, and if they're not, they get shipped out. So that's just like a normal thing. But if they arrive on a boat, we put them on an offshore detention centre on like islands off Australia, like places like Nauru, and essentially they stay in prison camps, and that's including, you know, men, women, and children. So, you know, there's like, you know, pregnant women who have given birth to, you know, babies in these essentially what are prison camps, and then the kids spend their first couple of years of their life there, and it's all based on this principle of what, you know, John Howard, our old Prime Minister from quite a few years ago, said, you know, what we will decide, you know, the manner in which people come to our country and how, sort of thing, which sounds good in reason, but the reality is that over 95% of the people that come to Australia by boat are proven to be genuine refugees. So it's a very, very small percentage that you are letting all of these people not come, just to stop a few percent of people who are, I guess, looking for a better life or with some other reason, but didn't have to leave where they were. But the majority of people, I mean, we get a lot of people coming to Australia from war-torn countries like Afghanistan or Iraq, and I always thought it was the height of irony that Australia would get involved in waging war in Iraq against the Taliban, against the Taliban in Afghanistan, and then that war causes a lot of people to get displaced and a very dangerous environment, even if the war is justified or not, regardless. And then from that, you know, people are then in a position where they flee the country to try to find somewhere where them and their family and, you know, their kids will be safe so that they don't die. And you have families that literally have flown a war that Australia was involved in. They've arrived on Australia's doorstep and they've been told that they're not welcome here and put on an island, sometimes for literally several years. Anyway, so that's one of my things that I feel very passionate about, because it's something very misunderstood, and it's also something that I feel, you know, people in society should have compassion and empathy for people who are in, you know, positions where, you know, they're desperate. And, you know, people say, oh, you know, they should join the queue and apply to come to Australia the proper way. But, you know, there isn't actually a way to apply from some of these countries. So some of these countries like Afghanistan, there isn't actually a legitimate way to apply to come to Australia and to wait a certain amount of time and then get granted a visa. That actually doesn't exist. And so a lot of people kind of, you know, say some of these things and are just not aware of the realities of the situation. And I think, you know, when there's a choice between being hard-hearted or being compassionate and empathetic to those less fortunate, that we should do the latter. Not everyone would agree, and if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. But you know, that's something that definitely I feel strongly about. I guess the other thing that I'm involved in is I am a member of the advisory board for the Centre of Hope, which is a school and orphanage in Hinch, Haiti. I got involved with them years ago because I had a festival, Sonic Forge Festival here in Australia, where it was a charity festival, and all the profits from that festival each year would get donated by myself to Centre of Hope. And over the last few years, I've kind of stayed involved with them. I actually just met up with one of the original architects of starting Centre of Hope, which is James Lipscomb. And I met up with him actually. He lives in the US on our recent tour, which was great, and talking to him about a few things, what's going on there. So if you're ever looking for a charity that is not like a big, huge thing that already gets $1 million from everyone else, they have a lot of money that they need to raise every year and continually to keep it all going. But it is something that basically relies on people to contribute. So that all of these kids who are now at this school here in Haiti are able to get the education that gives them an opportunity to uplift their life, because Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world. So if there's any chance we can give kids there to have an opportunity to uplift themselves, that's obviously something that is something that we, I say as an Australian coming from a relatively rich country, should be doing whatever we can to help those where we can. All right, on to something else. From Kevin, if you could pick one band to tour with, past or present, who would it be and why? I would pick to tour with Opeth after sometime between the release of Blackwater Park and Watershed, because that era of the band would have been just the perfect band for us to tour with, as far as helping us get bigger, and also just that I just adore all of those albums. Well, I adore all the albums from My Arms Your Hearse through to Watershed. I like the new ones too, but it's obviously a very different band, and a bit different to what we're doing now. But Blackwater Park is still one of my all-time favorite albums. And yeah, it would definitely be amazing to tour with that band, especially that era of that band, which is obviously not going to happen. But any era of, if we got offered an Opeth tour next year or the year after or whenever, I'm guaranteed we'd say yes. Anyways, Anna, hi Tim, congratulations on 70K for 2019. Is there any part of the event that you're particularly looking forward to, apart from the Neo show? Of course. I'm looking forward to watching Persephone, because I've never seen them before, and I love their music, and obviously I collaborated on one of their songs, but I've never had a chance to actually see them because they've never been to Australia. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to. Aside from that, there's other bands on the bill that I'm a big fan of as well. And I'm sure there's more bands that I don't know are going to play that are going to be announced. So it'll just be nice. And it'll also be nice, there's a lot of fans I just met on the recent North American tour that were saying they were going to be in the boat. And it'll be nice to get a chance to hang out with some more fans and, and go from there. Now, all right. Next question, John Gliss. Hello, Tim. Considering Neo's quite exquisite way of approaching music, what are the odds that we're going to see you guys release a cover song? Look, we've talked about it for years, but we've never found a song that we all connect with and have a good idea, because we don't want to recreate something, and the sort of instrumentation we have wouldn't necessarily work that well anyways. So I would say my honest answer is 50-50, and as for when that 50-50 would happen, I would say I have no idea. Jake Keeter. Jake, it was great to catch up with you at several shows as well. It was Minneapolis and also in Chicago, yeah. Jake's got 2 questions on behalf of Sarah. What is your hair care routine? My question is, and then your question is, what are the odds of seeing you guys perform Portalai in its entirety? Well, when I'm on tour, I don't get a chance to wash my hair very much because it's so thick it takes hours to dry, unless we're in the middle of summer. So I find it really difficult to wash it after a show, because otherwise it's not not dry by the time I go to bed. So basically, my hair care routine on tour is that I don't wash my hair a lot, and I wasn't even brushing it that much. And everyone goes, "Oh wow, you got wonderful hair." But really, I mean, my my hair is just a product of my mum, who has very thick hair. And it's funny because, you know, when I was at school, some kids would make fun of me because I had thick hair, which was a bit wild sometimes. And then now people think it's cool. So go figure. Some of the things that kids pick on you in high school for, you become an adult and all of a sudden people like you for it. So now on the flip side, if you ask that same question to Zen, he spends enormous amounts of time on his hair. So yeah, so he's the one with the intensive hair care routine for sure. Now, in regards to Port of Hawaii in its entirety, look, I'm sure we'll do some sort of anniversary performances for Port of Hawaii, but I don't know whether it'll be 10 year, 15, 20 year, 25, I'm not sure. I mean, we could do some 10-year anniversary shows, but if we have a new album out in 2022, then maybe we want to focus on the new record and not, and then maybe we'd push it back to 2027 or something like that. I don't know. I wouldn't think that we'd do anything like that except for some sort of anniversary tour. But yeah, as to whether we do it at 10 or 15 or 20, yeah, it does just kind of, I guess, depend where our career's at, you know, leading into that year, and whether we have an opportunity to do that, and whether there's demand from fans to do it. So I guess we'll, you know, assess that closer to the year. All right, Dan Schleifer. Greetings, Tim. You did such an amazing job on that Persephone track early this year. I was wondering, what other bands would you like to collaborate with in the future if presented an opportunity? I'd be really interested in collaborating. Well, first of all, I'm not going to seek out any collaborations, and because I don't have much time. But every now and then bands hit me up, and I do what I can. If I could reach out to someone and get them to agree, I'd be really interested in working with someone like Steven Wilson. I think he composes in a really interesting way. I think it'd be really well suited to the addition of the way I play the violin. I think I could do some interesting stuff. Like there's a great harmonica solo on the new Steven Wilson album, and I just remember, you know, thinking about how he's just, you know, using instruments in interesting ways. So that's definitely one person I think would be great. Otherwise, Devin Townsend, because I just think he's a incredible musician. He's been a huge inspiration for me for 20 years. And I still, you know, love what he does musically. You know, someone we'd absolutely love to tour with. Definitely be a dream to tour with Devin Townsend sometime as well. Yeah, he's such a diverse composer. You know, that would be another combination that would be a lot of fun. All right, Anka, who we are going to be seeing in Romania next month, along with a few other people. I think John Bliss is going to be there as well, and a few others. I got to ask you too, what was the nastiest, extreme, bad, illegal thing you ever did as a child teenager, and did you get away with it? And on a more serious tone, if you had the opportunity to change one thing about the world with a great impact on humanity, what would that be? I really wasn't that bad a kid. You know, I mean, I remember shoplifting, you know, like a little, like, Redskin, you know, lolly, like candy thing. I don't know if they had that, I don't have that outside of Australia, but, you know, like, that's about probably the worst thing that I had done, you know, when I was in high school or something like that. Aside from that, you know, things I used to get in trouble for was just silly things like, you know, smoking cigarettes and my parents catching me, or one time I had a little tiny bit of marijuana in my wallet, which a friend had given to me. There was almost nothing left. And I think I'd only ever smoked about like once ever or something like that. I was thinking maybe 17. And so I hadn't even smoked it or anything. And my little sister, who was maybe like 10 or 11 or something like that at that stage, found it in my wallet and gave it to Mum, asking, "What's this?" So I got, I didn't get yelled at. I got the "We're very disappointed in you, Tim" talk from that one, which is worse. Anyways, but yeah, I didn't really do too much. On a more serious tone, the opportunity to change one thing about the world with a great impact on humanity, what would that be? About the world. Well, maybe just... Well, there's just so much money in the world, and it's just not all given out in a proportionate way, you know. So a lot the rich people keep the money for themselves, and they're supposed to be in capitalism, this trickle-down effect that filters down to everybody. But the reality is that when you have money, you try and hang on to as much of it as you can, and so less and less filters down and trickles down the ladder to everybody else. So readdressing that, the imbalance in wealth equality across the world, the ability to uplift people in countries or continents like, for example, Africa, where there's a lot of people that are suffering. Maybe if we could just get rid of guns in America, that would be a great thing. That would have a huge impact on that country, and that would save thousands and thousands and thousands of unnecessary deaths every year. Dina, hey Tim, is there any chance that you'll play Petrichor on the Isan tour? It would be a great choice as you didn't play it on the last European tour. And another question, if you don't mind, do you have plans to record one of your concerts for a Blu-ray DVD release sometime in the future? Fan-filled YouTube videos just don't do justice. We did on the last Wintersun tour, we filmed and recorded a lot of shows. So what we are going to be doing is we were taking like proper audio from the desk, which we were then getting Troy to mix, so get like a proper mix of the real live sound, and then combine that with like a multicam video. So we're actually preparing a few of those for Patreon, so it's obviously not a DVD release, but something that, you know, is better than the standard YouTube fan video. As for a proper DVD release, I'm not sure. Maybe we might start to talk about that on the next record, but I'm not quite sure. Petrichor with Black Noise on the Isan tour, I don't know. I don't think we're going to do it on the Isan shows. We might do it on the headline shows. We only got like a couple in Israel and in Romania. I think we're probably going to do a pretty similar set list to the Wintersun tour, but we're going to add another track because we're playing an hour. And support is always hard because that balance of what we want to play, what we think our fans want to hear, but also trying to create a set list that we think will win over all the Isan fans so we can get new fans as well. So it's always a bit of a compromise support set list, whereas headline set list, we can very much go, okay, yep, we played these ones last time, you know, let's mix it up like we did in the US. We did Painters of the Tempest on our tour last year, so this time on a headline shows we did Pyrrhic and Petrichor with Black Noise instead of Painters of the Tempest because the song lengths are actually about the same. And we'll continue to do it with headline tours, but support ones are always a bit of a compromise. Joey Vandercook, hey Joey, looking forward to catching up with you soon as well. This is more of a suggestion than question, but please discuss this. I'm fairly surprised that during or after your tours, the Patreon supporters stays about equal in size. I know that it's a very difficult subject as a band to promote Patreon during the tour. The people coming to shows always provide you with such support, but I believe that the merchandise desk would be a prime spot to make people aware about it all. I know that this is a fine line to walk, but I'm sure you won't lose people already on board. Having like a small banner paper with Patreon and EL logo, ask us about it, then perhaps a small file something on paper with the main bullet points. Yes, so I agree, and actually I had Jetsen designing exactly this before the Wintersun tour, and ran out of time to get it finished so that we could get it printed up and bring it with us. But on the Isan tour, we will have something like that. We're going to get like A3 or A2 like poster like laminated to put on the merch desk, basically just advertising it. When it first got announced, I would talk about it a bit on stage. I haven't really done that for a while. Maybe I will, but I mean, I think the main thing is we're trying to organize is more, well, the main thing we've been focusing on this year is trying to improve the quality of the content on what we're giving members. And then once we felt that was more under control, we're going to focus more on advertising, get new people in, which is what we're basically getting towards now. What's your favorite and least favorite animal? Also from Joey. I like dogs, so I don't really like cats that much, I'm sorry. I had a beautiful German Shepherd who died a couple of years ago. That was my dad's, but I was living with him for a long time. Least favorite animal? Maybe I will say cats. Tina, and this looks like a nice short one. All right. This isn't a question for Tim the violinist, the singer and generally nicest guy in metal. That's obviously a lie. But for Mr. Charles, the manager, why are there so few articles, interviews, or concert reports about Neo in higher-ranking metal magazines, print and online? Okay, so if anyone wants to read Tina's full question, you can read it, because it's really, really long. But basically, what she's writing about is that question of, like, you know, why there are so few articles in the bigger press and talking about how examples of how there hasn't been enough, in her opinion, of coverage of us. Basically, that's not up to us. So it's not that we just book it in. We need people to want to cover us. So when our album came out, our record label hit up basically every magazine in the world saying, you know, the band's available for interviews, new album out, blah, blah, blah. And some magazines get back saying, yes, can we book an interview? And other magazines don't, maybe not because they don't like the band at all, but because they've got other bands on their list that are high priority. Because now these magazines, there's only so much room in the magazine, and most bands don't get coverage. That's the reality. So in these big magazines, most bands don't get coverage. So to be one of those bands that do get coverage, they have to really rate you very highly. Now, in the UK, for example, we've got basically jack shit coverage in the UK magazines. And I remember after we sold out 500 people in London on our tour early this year, literally sending an email to our publicist from Season of Mist, our record label, saying, do you think now we might be able to get some bloody reviews in, you know, the UK press, now that we've sold out 500 people and proved that we're, you know, not a tiny band here in England anymore. So, and that stuff does make a difference. But sometimes it's just choosing who they think is an interesting story. So there are plenty of bands who are much smaller than us that get coverage when we don't. And then there's also, you know, bands that are way bigger than us who get tons of coverage and covers and all that sort of stuff as well. But basically all we can do is employ people like publicists to try and engage these people. Now, our record label has publicists, so that's their job. And basically there's nothing really much as the band we can do except for making ourselves available. So, you know, the label will sometimes, you know, book ads in magazines to try and help get, you know, interviews as a combined thing. So they might spend $1,000 on putting an ad under the proviso that the magazine also gives us an interview. That sort of stuff sometimes happens with press stuff, but yeah, but it is been a frustration. We actually got more press for Europe after Citadel than Urn, even though Urn sold like twice as many copies. So Urn was much more popular overall, but the press didn't cover Urn as much. And the theory from some of the European publicists, stuff like that we were talking to, was just because Citadel was the first thing that they had paid attention to, because a lot of them didn't pay attention to Port Levi. Citadel was the first thing, and it was fresh and new, and so they gave it a bit of coverage. And then after that, they moved on. But we'll see. Hopefully, if we keep getting bigger, then eventually it kind of becomes difficult for people to ignore you. But for now, we just continue to basically do things ourselves and get press whatever way we can and engage with our fans directly, because we know that you guys are the people who matter, and go from there. Raluca, hello Tim, thank you for taking the time to do this. Zen is, he says, in 2 more bands except Neo. Are you planning to start new music projects? You know, so you can better explore your fuzzy and bubbly side that Zen hates. Thank you. For now, the answer is no. Yeah, so the answer is no for now. As to whether that ever happens in the future, I'll see. I mean, at the moment, I just try to focus on writing stuff for Neo and we always keep expanding what we're doing with Neo. And so I never really feel that restricted with what I'm writing, which is good. I'm just so busy I don't really have any time, basically. But I wouldn't be surprised if I do something, probably more of it as a solo project sometime later down the track. So there's quite a lot of stuff that I have written and composed over the last, say, 15 years. That some of it would be interesting to release. But we'll see. Oyvind Stenstall. All right, are there any musical ideas you would like to implement or explore further in Nail Bites Scars that maybe didn't fit with the sound on other albums or you simply haven't gotten to yet? Or do you even have ideas for other projects you would like to work on, like your collaboration with Persephone? Best of luck on your tour. I'll see you in Gothenburg in 2 weeks, traveling from Norway. Great, I'll see you there. I just want to keep pushing things in different directions. So I've actually been writing quite a bit of stuff on piano lately. We'll see if some of that, I think some of that might get included on the record. So that's something that I'm interested in and that I like composing, that would be interesting to include more. There's just a little bit of piano on Citadel, but there isn't any on Ern. So it's something we've done a little bit of before, but I've kind of got a few things in the works at the moment. Aside from that, yeah, I just want to keep pushing things in every direction. You know, I want to write longer songs. I want to write shorter songs. You know, I want to keep pushing ourselves just to be the best, you know, band that possibly can be, and whatever direction that takes us will be interesting. And for the collaborations, yeah, I think I've already covered that earlier. From Jen J, in terms of Welkin Entertainment Progfest, what are some things that you look for when trying to book bands and negotiate who to bring on tour for the festival? So for those who don't know, I run a tour company called Welkin Entertainment, and we have a festival in Australia called Progfest. If you are Australian, we have The Ocean, Monuments, and Sky Harbour as our 3 headliners this year, and we'll have a whole bunch of other Australian acts on there as well. The main thing is that they've got to fit with the vibe of Progfest. I've got to have some evidence from what I can see that they have a real fan base in Australia. So either from their previous touring history or from their, you know, social media activity or whatever. So it's trying to book bands at a time where I think they'll contribute positively, and then it's trying to work out how much they're worth so we can offer them a certain amount of money so that we can have ticket sales at a certain point so that I don't go broke and instead can make money from the festival. So that's always kind of a fun challenge, because tour promoting is educated gambling. Anyone who says otherwise is lying. But you know, it is something that you can really research a lot and really know the scene and know where bands are at. Are they on the up? Are they on the down? Are they plateauing where they have been? Is their new album good? Has it been received well by fans? Has it been received poorly by fans? These are all the things you need to know before you're offering money to a band, so you can understand how many people are likely to turn up. And from Joao Eris, have you guys considered other kinds of non-full length albums like collaborations? We've covered that earlier in this interview. Or less known artists, or the acoustic EP album. Now, we are talking about the acoustic EP at the moment for some time in the first half of next year. That's not confirmed, so it's just a discussion that's happening at the moment. And if we did that, it would be maybe one new song and some reinventions of old songs, like what we did for the acoustic show, which was mainly like reimaginings of the old songs in an acoustic fashion. But it's not a primary thing. It'd be kind of like a bonus thing if we have time, in addition, because we don't want to take that away from writing new records. So that's the main thing. And if we think we have time to do something extra, we might look at doing something like that. If we did it, we're looking at doing it potentially as a Patreon-only release. That's why we're talking about it. Could we do something special like that for Patreon? Maybe we'll release one song to the public, and if people want to hear the whole EP, they have to sign up to Patreon. So that's, what do you guys think? Is that a good idea? That's, you know, what we're talking about at the moment. Also, could you please do an interview with Yari and later with Ihsahn and post on to Patreon? Now, Yari was great. I had a great time with him on the tour. Fantastic singer. You know, it was really a pleasure to tour with them. I spent, you know, quite a bit of time hanging out with Yari and talking about a few things. We talked about Patreon and crowdfunding, and it was really interesting talking music business and stuff like that with him. And we were also talking singing a bit and stuff like that. He does keep to himself a bit on show days because you know, he has a hugely demanding vocal performance. They were doing an hour 45-minute show, and so it's very demanding. And he doesn't really go out and party after the shows, because he goes and rests and looks after himself well, so we can put on a great show for the fans. So it wasn't really too many opportunities to do something. I was hoping to maybe do something on the last show, but we didn't really have that much time. Within like an hour or two, we were leaving and all that sort of stuff. But we are sharing, and also we weren't sharing days off with them, which is the best time to film things on a day off. Because when we had a day off, almost all the day off, we added a headline show on the US tour. Whereas we're at the Ihsahn tour, we're sharing a bus with Isan. So hopefully I can do that. So I'll definitely aim to do that for you. All right. Silvio Neves Neto. What advice would you give to someone who is learning their first instrument? My main piece of advice would be to get a teacher and have a weekly lesson so that you can get that regular feedback and really make sure that the technique you're developing is going to put you going in the right direction. That's really, really important. What was the last song you heard that left an impact on you? Last song I heard that had an impact on me. Let's see. I'm just looking through my playlist. I mean, there's so many songs that have an impact on me. I mean, something new that I've been listening. I mean, I'm trying to think about a song, but there's so much stuff I've been listening to. I've really been digging the new Beyond Creation and Behemoth and Monuments and Psychroptic and the new Architects song Hereafter. I think it's great. I love that band a lot. What else have I been listening to? Yeah, I'm trying to think of a particular song, but yeah, there's lots of great stuff that is out this year, and you know, I think that there's always great music out there if you can take the time to make sure you listen. Now, as a member of the Neo group and the Naval Illuminati, we feel really close to you guys. Do you feel this proximity and support changed even a bit the way the band is? Not really. I think it just amplifies what we're doing and gives us a strong connection with you guys. So we just try to make sure that we show appreciation for the people that appreciate what we're doing. It's not really that complicated. It's just don't be an asshole and be respectful and appreciative of the people that are being appreciative of the music we're creating. Now, is Zen really a vampire? Would you rather be one too or be able to eat garlic? Yes, he is a vampire. That's a well-known fact. Silly question. And no, I'm comfortable being human. Brazil has asked you to come here plenty of times, I believe. What are the biggest setbacks in planning or finances to get over here? Now, we've never actually been offered a show in Brazil. So that's the challenge, is that when you go to places like that they're not that big markets in comparison, as far as, like, you know, getting paid well, and it's expensive to come from Australia to play in somewhere like Brazil. So we've actually never had a promoter from South America contact us, say, hey, we want to offer you a show here and blah, blah, blah. But our agent at the moment is working on trying to bring us to South America next year. Like, that's happening right now. Now, I don't know for sure if that's going to happen, but he's talking to promoters in South America, including Brazil, basically saying, hey, the band was just in Mexico and the tour went really well, and we had a sold-out show in Mexico City, and they should do really well in Brazil and Chile and places like that, and you should book them. So that's basically what's happening at the moment. But the biggest challenge is just that we're on the other side of the world, and often you have to be quite big to get an offer where you can come and not lose thousands and thousands of dollars. So that's the challenge. You often have to be quite big before you get offers from these markets that, you know, where Panzo tours often. All right, Eva. Knowing how hard it is yourself, would you advise your daughter to become a touring musician? Good question. Especially seeing I'm home today for 10 days, and then I have to leave her again for 3.5 weeks after having already been away for 6 weeks. I would just advise her to do whatever she's passionate about. I don't think that you should put limitations on yourself in your career. I think that it's difficult having a family and touring around the world as a job, as a career. But at the same time, I mean, my music and my art is so much of who I am and what I'm passionate about, that sacrificing who you are as a person and what you're good at is not something I would advise on to anybody. At the same time, you have to be realistic and you have to find some sort of balance. So there's no point sending yourself bankrupt or your family bankrupt so that you can go do things that are just for yourself. But at the same time, you should take the opportunities given to you and try to take things as far as you can. So, I mean, with her, I'll always just tell her to do whatever she wants to do. and to make sure that whatever she wants to do, that she just works hard, because I definitely feel that the biggest difference at the top level is work ethic as opposed to just talent. You know, like there's lots of musicians that have talent, you know, like talent, but the reality is that it's if you work harder than everybody else, then you're probably going to do pretty well. All right, Jonah Swab, how did you come to join Neo? Now, Tina's very gladly already answered the question, but basically the short version is September 2003, there was a metal forum where someone was posting up looking for a cellist to join a band. I made a comment that was kind of half-hearted, saying, hey, I'm not a cellist, but if anyone's looking for a violinist, let you know. It was about that time, not long before that, I discovered a song called Angina by Tristania, which was the first thing I'd ever heard with violin over a metal track. And so the idea that you could play violin metal had only just really entered my mind, because before that the only thing I'd heard was Apocalyptica, but that was all cellos. It was not like a normal metal band. Anyways, Zen saw my comment and sent me a PM saying, hey, I'm starting a band, and really would be really cool to have a violinist. Do you want to come down and jam and see what you think about music and blah blah blah? And so I did, and I joined, and the rest, as Tina says, the rest is history. Now, last question, which I skipped before and I'm just coming back to, from Carter Core. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. It's really hard having names from all around the world in so many different languages and trying to pronounce them all, because I know I get some wrong, but I do my best. But just if I get something wrong, just let me know and I'll try to get it right the next time. Now, Carter's asked, I just wanted to say that I'm in awe at how much you can achieve while managing chronic fatigue syndrome. I have had ME/CFS for many years, and like you, take shitloads of supplements and have to manage very carefully activity and rest, and be cautious in case I crash. If you feel comfortable, could you comment on how you manage your busy life while looking after yourself? No worries if you decide not to comment. So, for those who don't know, so for those who don't know, back in 2002, yeah, it was 2002. I think it was November 2002. I got very sick with glandular fever. I was basically bedridden for about 3 months. And I didn't get better, and it turned into chronic fatigue syndrome, and I had to take a whole year off studying the violin. I scraped by, I did part-time at university and scraped by literally getting, like a pass in my academic subjects, just so I didn't have to drop out of university, because I really didn't want to drop out. But I had to defer all my performance subjects. And I was sick for many, many years, and I still have problems. It's still difficult, and I still have to look after myself very well in order to be able to get by. But basically, when the band first started playing shows and we first started doing interstate shows, it was really difficult, because if I overexerted myself by just doing something like playing a show and jumping around and headbanging, I would wake up the next day just with insanely excessive fatigue, to the degree that I struggled to be able to get out of bed. Now, doing a tour like that was extraordinarily difficult. So in the early days, I mean, there was times where literally we played 2 or 3 shows in a row. And I remember us doing a show where we did Canberra, Sydney, Melbourne with Psychroptic, and while the rest of the band drove to Canberra, left early in the morning, I flew later. And then we drove the next day to Sydney, because it was only about 3 hours. And then after Sydney show, I slept in later than the other guys, and then flew down to Melbourne. There was just no way I could do those sort of shows unless I was able to get that extra rest. And even then, it was an enormous struggle. And this is, I'm talking about maybe 2008, 9, something like that. And at that time, the vibe in the band was that we thought, me and the rest of the band, that I would never be able to tour internationally. because the jet lag and the long schedules and all that sort of stuff. And so as soon as we started talking about that option, it was always, the big question mark was on Tim, you know, is Tim going to be able to handle it? Is Tim going to get sick? Is Tim going to fall apart on tour and, you know, and not be able to continue? That was all the discussion. So it's been really difficult. I mean, it really is a long, I almost feel like I need to, you know, write like my memoirs talking about like the whole thing, because it's, you know, so involved, you know, dealing with a long-term illness whilst at the same time, you know, having to manage, you know, a career as a touring musician, which is a really difficult lifestyle in the first place. Basically, the things that I slowly worked out over many years was just become more in tune with my body. So I worked out that over time, that things that benefit me were I don't drink any coffee, I don't drink any soft drink, I very rarely drink any alcohol, I don't drink alcohol at all on tour. I had one shot of vodka, which the Winter Sun guys were handing out after our last show in New York City, and that was it for the whole tour. I probably won't have anything else until, you know, after the Isan tour. Now, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, I focus on trying to just look after my health as much as I can. So I take a variety of different, you know, supplements and stuff like that, which are tailored to suit me. There's different things that I've experimented with over the years to try and do that. One thing that I felt really helped, and I can highly recommend to anyone, is meditation. When I was at university, and the way I got through it, I had to do 3-4 hours violin practice every day. In order to do that, I would have to dedicate the whole entire day to basically practice and rest and recovery, because my chronic fatigue syndrome was so bad. And I would do like an hour practice, and then I'd be exhausted, and I'd take a bit of break, and I'd do like another half an hour, and then I'd have my lunch, and then I'd do about 1 hour of meditation, like a full 1 hour. And then after that, then I would do another hour, you know, violin practice, or sometimes I'd be too tired and I'd do half an hour, and then I'd take another break and I'd go do something else, and then maybe later in the day I'd do half an hour more, with the whole aim of just trying to get to the end of the day and having had enough practice so that I could match what everyone else was doing to compete to get to the standard where I needed to be, trying to become a professional violinist, because it's very competitive. And the reality is, if you don't put in the hard work, no one that doesn't practice a lot becomes a professional violinist. It's just the reality. So that stuff was a really big focus. So it's not just about so part of it is what you're putting in your body and making sure that you're looking after yourself. Things like caffeine and sugar. I really don't have that much junk food that much anymore. Like especially, you know, things like, you know, lollies and candy and chocolate. I try to have them sparingly. Anything that affects my body by giving it an artificial high with sugar or caffeine, stuff like that, affects me more on the way down than a normal person. So I have to be really aware of that. That's why I really like coffee, but I can't drink it anymore, because it literally makes me feel like makes me feel all jittery. It just has such a big effect, because I'm so unused to having things like caffeine and that's, you know, concentrated stuff anymore. But basically, the big thing that meditation did, getting back to that, was it allowed me to maintain strong mental health, which is the biggest challenge for anyone with a long-term illness. Doesn't matter what it is. So anyone who's had any sort of long-term illness knows that the biggest challenge is maintaining a positive mindset and maintaining mental health. Now, I was able to do that well, but I do feel like people are very much genetically people have a predisposition, that's what I meant to say, you know, towards or not towards things like that. So some people have a predisposition towards getting depression, and it's easier for them to develop, you know, clinical depression, and other people don't. And I feel like I'm lucky, and I think that I don't. You know, I naturally just have a very positive way of looking at things. And the big thing I focused on when I first got sick, you know, 16 years ago almost, was trying to continue to be myself. And the downside of that was that I used to have people accused me that I wasn't actually sick because they didn't understand my illness and because I seemed energetic and bubbly and things like that. And it was just, well, I'm just being myself. And even if on the inside I feel like I'm about to fall over, I tried to just keep true to who I was as a person and what I wanted to do with my life. The way I got around it in other ways was I did part-time for uni, so I did a 4-year degree in 7 years it took me to do for my Bachelor of Music with Honours in classical violin performance. And I also started my own business in Welcome Entertainment, funnily enough, because I was not well enough to consistently be able to get a job. And it wasn't until 2010, so it was 8 years later, that I actually got my first job. There was an 8-year gap where the only stuff I did for work was stuff that I had complete control over. And I take that as one of those blessings in disguise where it forced me to focus on things that I could control my schedule, because sometimes if I could not get out of bed, then that day I could, sleep in and try to wait until I felt well enough and then go forward from there. But it's definitely very, very challenging. I am a lot better than I used to be. The first, I would say, 8-9 years, I was very, very sick. And even when I was teaching at a school in 2010. It was the first job that I'd had. And even just the simple thing of being able to get out of bed and go to work in the morning consistently, I found just incredibly difficult. And the only reason I pushed through was because I was in a relationship and I was, how old was I? I was 28. And, I wanted to move in with a girl and start my life, because I was living with my dad through all my 20s because I was not in a position where I could ever earn enough money to move out. And that's been a big challenge. That was a challenge then when I had my daughter and being able to not get enough sleep and all that. I mean, the only other thing that I guess I haven't mentioned is just general fitness. So the thing that I could do, that I learned that I could do, was Pilates. So Pilates was the one thing that I worked out in about 2007, so about after I'd already been sick for about 5 years. Well, that was a type of exercise that I could do and made me feel better instead of worse. Whereas if I went to the gym or if I went for a run, all these things would actually make me feel worse, and I would actually wake up the next day feeling like I'd run 700 kilometers and like I'd overdone it, even if I literally just ran around the block for 10 minutes. So clinical Pilates, working with a physiotherapist to get a program that was developed for me to be within my capabilities was a really great thing. And then maintaining that over the years, things like Pilates and, now going to the gym, now that I'm a bit better, and trying to make sure I focus on developing fitness, and I have to really do it very slowly. I can't push myself. If I push myself, I get sick. So I just have to be really patient and go on from there. Anyway, so that's a bit of talk on that topic. A lot of you I don't think would know much about that. It is the sort of thing where slowly over the last 7 or 8 years, I've slowly been getting better to the degree that we were able to start touring internationally, in 2015, more regularly. And thankfully, I've been able to manage it, but it is why sometimes I disappear backstage and aren't kind of talking to people, and is why, I spend a lot of time on the bus and not out partying with some of the other guys, because I just, I know that if I don't look after myself 1,000,000%, that I won't be able to make it work. And, the whole reason I'm there is to perform for you guys, and that's my priority. So, anyways, hope that answers all your questions. We'll see you again sometime soon. Thanks.